If you believe in fate, then you know that one decision, just one, can change the course of your life forever. That's why you should stick around. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that might just change the way you see the world. Because what happened to Jessica that night, it was something no one saw coming. Jessica Harper was tired. Not just physically, but in every way a person could be. The kind of exhaustion that digs into your bones, where even hope feels like a luxury. Her life had been a series of struggles, and no matter how hard she tried, it felt like she was running in place. She glanced down at the grocery bags in her hands. Just a few essentials she had managed to afford with the last $20 bill in her purse. A loaf of bread, a carton of milk, some rice. It wasn't enough, not for her and her 5-year-old son, Liam. But it would have to do. Rent was due in a week, and she had no idea where she'd find the money. The electricity bill was already past due. Liam had outgrown his shoes, and the winter cold was creeping in fast. As she walked through the nearly empty parking lot of the grocery store, the wind howled around her, biting through her thin coat. She was almost to her car when something caught her eye. A small, black leather wallet lying near the front wheel of an old sedan. Jessica hesitated. She looked around, but the lot was deserted except for a couple of cars parked near the entrance. Bending down, she picked it up, her fingers trembling slightly. The leather was soft, expensive. This wasn't some worn-out, overstuffed wallet like the one she carried. Her heart pounded as she flipped it open. Cash. So much cash. $100 bills, neatly stacked, the crisp paper nearly glowing under the dim streetlights. Jessica's breath hitched. It had to be at least maybe $10,000. Her fingers curled around the wallet as an overwhelming wave of emotion hit her. This kind of money could change everything. Rent paid, groceries stocked, a warm winter coat for Liam. The thought sent tears to her eyes. But then came the other thought, the right thing to do, the thing she had always believed in, even when life had been unbearably unfair. This money wasn't hers. Jessica swallowed hard, her mind spinning. She quickly checked for an ID, a name, something, anything. But the wallet held nothing but cash and a single business card, blank except for a phone number scribbled in black ink. Her fingers trembled as she traced the number with her eyes. Should she call? What if it belonged to someone who didn't deserve it? What if it was drug money? What if it was a test? She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Liam's face flashed in her mind. His innocent smile. His little voice asking if Santa was coming this year. Even though she didn't have the heart to tell him that Christmas morning might come with nothing but love. Jessica stuffed the wallet into her purse, her heart pounding like a drum. She needed time to think. She needed to make the right decision. But as she turned to leave, she didn't notice the shadow standing near the edge of the lot, watching, waiting. And just like that, Jessica's life had already begun to change. Jessica gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. The wallet sat on the passenger seat like a ticking time bomb, its presence pressing against her conscience. $10,000, maybe more, was just sitting there waiting for her to make a decision. She pulled into the driveway of her small, run-down apartment complex. The porch light flickered, barely illuminating the cracked pavement leading to her door. Liam's babysitter, Mrs. Evans, was waiting on the couch when she stepped inside. "Hey, sweetheart," the elderly woman said with a warm smile. "He's asleep. He tried waiting up for you." Jessica forced a smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Evans. I appreciate you so much." Mrs. Evans gave her a knowing look. She had seen Jessica struggle, had watched her scrape by day after day, but she never pried, just offered help when she could. "You'll be okay, honey. You always find a way." If only she knew. After Mrs. Evans left, Jessica tiptoed into Liam's small bedroom. He was curled up under a thin blanket, his tiny fingers clutching the stuffed rabbit he'd had since birth. Her heart ached as she watched him sleep. She reached out, brushing a stray curl from his forehead. He deserved so much more than this. Jessica walked back into the kitchen, her pulse hammering in her ears. She sat at the table, took a deep breath, and emptied the wallet onto the surface. The bills spread out like a fan, more money than she had ever held in her life. Her hands shook as she picked up the single business card. The number was handwritten, no name, no company, just 10 digits staring back at her. She grabbed her phone. Her fingers hovered over the keypad. She could just pretend she never found it. Use the money. Fix everything. No one would ever know. Her rent. Food. Liam's shoes. Jessica exhaled sharply and dialed the number before she could change her mind. It rang once, twice. Then a voice answered. Deep, calm, controlled. You have something of mine. Jessica's stomach twisted. I found a wallet. Silence. Where are you? The voice asked. Jessica hesitated. Something about the man's tone sent a chill through her. It wasn't gratitude. It was something else. Who are you? She countered. You don't need to know that. Just tell me where you are, and I'll come get it. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to be careful. She had expected relief, maybe even thanks, but instead, the man sounded cold. Almost dangerous. Jessica gripped the phone tighter. I can drop it off somewhere. A public place. A beat of silence. Then, fine. Meet me at the diner on 5th and Maple in an hour. The line went dead. Jessica stared at her phone, heart racing. This wasn't normal. Something was off. She looked back at the money spread across her kitchen table. What had she just gotten herself into? Jessica sat frozen at the kitchen table, staring at the phone in her hand. The man's voice lingered in her mind. Calm, cold, and unsettling. Something wasn't right. She had expected relief, maybe even gratitude, but instead, she got a demand. She looked at the money again. $10,000, maybe more. If this man had that kind of cash in his wallet, what did he do for a living? And why did he sound so dangerous? Her first instinct was to forget about the whole thing. Leave the wallet somewhere safe. Let the man pick it up without her getting involved. But that would mean stepping into even more uncertainty. What if he accused her of stealing? What if he came looking for her? Jessica swallowed hard. She had no choice now. She had already made the call. She grabbed the wallet and stuffed it back into her purse. Before she left, she checked on Liam one last time. His little body rose and fell with each peaceful breath. He had no idea that his mother was about to meet a stranger in the middle of the night, because she had done the right thing. The drive to the diner felt like an eternity. The streets were quiet, the neon glow of the city casting eerie shadows on the pavement. When she pulled into the parking lot, she spotted a black SUV sitting in the farthest corner, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. Jessica's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, to go home, to forget she ever found the wallet. But it was too late. A man stepped out of the SUV. Tall, broad shoulders, expensive black coat. His movements were slow, deliberate. Even from a distance, Jessica could feel his presence. Like he was someone who always got what he wanted. She took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. The man watched her approach, his hands in his coat pockets. His face was unreadable, but his dark eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her skin crawl. You have it. His voice was just as cold as it had been on the phone. Jessica nodded, holding up the wallet. I found it outside the grocery store. He didn't reach for it immediately. Instead, he studied her. The weight of his gaze made her uneasy. You didn't take anything? Her heart pounded. No, I just called the number inside. The man held out his hand, and Jessica hesitated before giving him the wallet. He flipped it open, quickly counting the cash before nodding to himself. For a brief second, Jessica thought he might thank her. Instead, he gave her another long, unreadable look. You made a mistake calling me, he said. Jessica's stomach dropped. What do you mean? The man took a slow step forward, lowering his voice. That money wasn't supposed to be lost. And now you're involved. Jessica's breath caught in her throat. She took a step back, her pulse racing. I was just trying to do the right thing. The man smirked, but there was no warmth in it. Sometimes the right thing puts you in the wrong place. Before Jessica could respond, another car pulled into the lot. A sleek, silver sedan. The man's entire demeanor shifted. His jaw tightened. His eyes darkened. He turned his back to Jessica, pulling out his phone. Jessica felt the shift in the air, the tension thick enough to choke on. Whoever was in that car, it wasn't good news. She took a single step back toward her car. The man turned his head slightly, just enough to warn her with a quiet but firm command. Get out of here. Now. Jessica didn't need to be told twice. She spun on her heel, heart hammering, and rushed back to her car. As she sped out of the parking lot, she saw the man still standing there, his hands in his pockets, watching her leave. She had thought she was doing the right thing. So why did it feel like she had just made the biggest mistake of her life? Jessica's hands were shaking as she gripped the steering wheel. The city lights blurred past her, but she barely noticed. Her mind was spinning. The man's warning echoed in her head, cold, sharp, final. You made a mistake calling me. That money wasn't supposed to be lost. And now you're involved. What did that mean? Who was he? And more importantly, what had she just gotten herself into? She had only tried to do the right thing. She could have taken the money, could have disappeared into the night, but she didn't. And instead of being thanked, she was treated like she had stepped into something dangerous. Jessica checked the rearview mirror for the 10th time. The black SUV was still parked in the diner lot, but the silver sedan had pulled up beside it. The man hadn't followed her, yet. She pressed the gas a little harder, needing to get home. Liam was there. He was her priority. By the time she pulled into her driveway, the panic in her chest had settled into something heavier, dread. She sat in the car for a moment, the engine idling. The apartment was dark except for the soft glow of the nightlight in Liam's room. Everything was exactly as she had left it. Normal. Safe. But for how long? Jessica forced herself to move. She stepped inside, locking the door behind her. Every sound in the apartment felt amplified. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards, the steady rhythm of her own breathing. She walked to Liam's room, standing in the doorway. He was still curled up with his stuffed rabbit, his tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. Jessica's heart clenched. Whatever was happening, whoever that man was, she couldn't let it touch Liam. She barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the man's piercing stare, the way his body had tensed when the silver car pulled in. Something told her that moment had meant more than she realized. The next morning, she tried to push the encounter out of her mind. She went through her usual routine, making breakfast, getting Liam dressed for preschool, forcing a smile when he asked if Santa was bringing him a toy this year. But as she stepped outside, her stomach dropped. A black SUV was parked down the street. Her blood turned to ice. Was it him? She tried to stay calm. Could have been a coincidence. Just a random car. But as she walked Liam to her own beat-up sedan, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She buckled him into his seat and forced herself not to look back at the SUV. Just as she pulled onto the road, her phone vibrated. She hesitated before glancing at the screen. Unknown number. Jessica swallowed hard. She let it go to voicemail, but a few seconds later, a text popped up. We need to talk. Her heart pounded. She had never given that man her number. How did he have it? Jessica gripped the wheel tighter, her breath unsteady. She had tried to do the right thing. So why did it feel like she had just put a target on her back? Jessica's hands trembled as she gripped the phone, staring at the text. We need to talk. Her stomach twisted into knots. She hadn't given him her number. She hadn't told him where she lived. Yet somehow he had found her. The black SUV was still parked down the street. Its tinted windows made it impossible to see inside, but she felt the eyes on her. She had to think fast. Jessica started the car, keeping her breathing steady for Liam's sake. He was in the back seat, blissfully unaware of the danger lurking outside. Mommy, can we get pancakes? He asked, swinging his little legs. She forced a smile. Of course, baby. We'll go somewhere special today. Her heart raced as she pulled out of the driveway, making sure not to look at the SUV. She needed to get away to figure out what to do next. She took the long route to Liam's preschool, switching lanes, turning down unfamiliar streets, checking the mirror every few seconds. The SUV followed. Jessica's pulse pounded. She needed help, but from who? The police? No. What would she even tell them? That she found a wallet and now some rich, dangerous man was following her? They wouldn't take her seriously. She needed answers. She made a sharp right into a busy shopping center and parked near the entrance of a grocery store. The SUV slowed but didn't stop. Instead, it pulled into a parking spot farther away, watching. Jessica took a deep breath and picked up her phone. If this man wanted to talk, then fine. She would talk, but on her terms. She texted back. If you have something to say it now. What do you want from me? A response came almost immediately. Meet me alone. Jessica's jaw tightened. No way. She typed back. I have a child. I'm not playing games. If you don't tell me what's going on, I'm going to the police. A pause. Then, you don't understand what you stepped into. Jessica's fingers hovered over the screen, anger bubbling in her chest. She was done feeling helpless. Then explain it to me. Another long pause. Then a different message came through. Check the wallet. Her heart skipped a beat. The wallet? She had returned it, but she had barely looked through it. Was there something inside she hadn't noticed? Jessica's mind raced. Had she missed something important? Something dangerous? A wave of nausea rolled through her. She couldn't run forever. Whatever this was, she had to face it. With one last glance at Liam, his innocent face, his bright eyes looking up at her, completely unaware of the storm surrounding them. She knew she had no choice. She took a deep breath, and she turned the car around. She was going to find out the truth.